Watch this. Let's watch this. Watch. Extra history about Admiral Yi.
1572, 26 years earlier. A 28-year-old man rides across an open plain. A group of military men stand quietly, observing. His horse stumbles. He's thrown. At first, everybody watching thinks he's dead. His leg is horribly bent, broken. But after a moment, he gets up, dragging one leg behind him, and pulls himself to a willow tree.
Okay.
He binds his leg with its branches, remounts his horse, and finishes the military examination. He fails the exam anyway, but 4 years later, he'll be back.
That's insane to fail him. That's like the most Giga Chad thing a soldier could ever do. To hand him an F after that is crazy. That's exactly what you want on the battlefield. Nice try, but yeah, your time was too slow. That's crazy.
He'll pass, and so will begin the career of one of the most glorious admirals of all time. It's strange that this man even decided to join the military. Korea had known 200 years of relative peace, threatened only by the occasional raids from the Jurchen tribes on the northern border and pirate crews plying the nearby sea. The military was not a highly respected career choice for a man of noble birth. Taking the civil service exams and joining the ranks of the Confucian court was a much better way to achieve power and success. And yet this man, Yi Sun-shin, though he was schooled in the Confucian texts, had dreamed of being a soldier since he was a little boy.
Okay.
And so at last, when he had passed the military exam, he was appointed to a desolate fort along the northern border. While most of the border forts were pits of corruption, seen simply as a place to dump individuals who had fallen out of favor with the court, Yi drilled his men rigorously and refortified his post, bringing it up to true readiness in case of an attack. One day, the provincial governor came by to inspect the post. This was a man all of the fort commanders dreaded, known for his harsh punishments and brutal discipline. But when he came to Yi, he simply said, well done, and moved on. Shortly thereafter, Yi was moved back to Seoul, a sign of growing favor, and he was given a post at the military academy there, training new recruits. He was by all accounts rigorous, diligent, and incorruptible. And this was exactly the problem. At this time,
I would like to vote for Admiral Yi, a Korean admiral from hundreds of years ago, for U.S. president. Who's with me? Okay? I would like to bring him back. He may not speak English, but I think we can put him in office.
The military academy was actually a tool for younger noble sons to jump up the ranks quickly, and for courtiers to channel their favorite people into the cushiest assignments. And Yi was not cooperating. So, after a short stay in Seoul, he was booted back to a provincial assignment. By July, though, he had secured a position running a naval garrison and was rapidly rising up the ranks again. But here, too, he was schemed against by corrupt officials. Many attempts were made to have Yi removed, but each one he parried expertly until, one day, one of his previous superiors from the military academy, one who Yi had rebuked for corruption, was called to his province to do an inspection. Seeing an opportunity for revenge, the inspector wrote a report castigating Yi, saying he was completely negligent. When the report got to Seoul, Yi found himself dismissed from the military entirely.
Boo!
4 months later, though, he was vindicated. Found innocent of the charges against him, he was returned to service, but demoted to the lowest possible officer grade. He might have languished at this menial post, but at last his diligence was finally rewarded when he was brought back to meaningful duty by none other than one of his former rivals. One of the fleet commanders who Yi had served under while maintaining the naval garrison had been transferred to the northern frontier, and knowing that he'd need good, capable officers, he requested Yi be sent with him.
He was actually good,
Soon, though, it became clear that Yi was needed to garrison a fort on the Tumen River, which was one of the demarcation lines between Jurchen and Korean territory. Jurchen raiders roamed far south of the Korean border, looting and pillaging at will. Raids had nearly overrun the nearby frontier province, and so Yi took up the post. He drilled his troops until they were in top shape, and knowing that simply shoring up the defenses wouldn't be enough, he laid his troops out for an ambush and then lured the raiders into Korean territory. He fell on them with a ferocity and a swiftness they had never seen in Korea. Within hours, the tribes were smashed and their power shattered. They would never again be such a threat to the province. But here too, Yi was stymied by a jealous superior, and while the court was jubilant about his success, the official record reads, although the court recognized Yi Sun-shin's meritorious service to the king, it nevertheless decided against awarding him a prize.
Boo!
Shortly after this, Yi's father died, and being deeply rooted in Confucian ideals, Yi retired home for 3 years in accordance with the traditional mourning period. When he at last returned to service,
3
he was put in
years?
charge of transportation for the court, but a mere 16 days later, it was decided that Yi
Bro, jobs nowadays wouldn't give you a half hour. Your dad could die while you're at work. You'd have to finish your shift, bro. That's crazy. 3 years. Yeah, you'd have a lot of haters.
was needed too badly at the border, and once again he was sent north. He was to man a small island fortress. Undermanned, crumbling, beyond disrepair, he once again drilled its garrison, shored up its defenses, and week after week sent out a request to the district commander for reinforcements.
Okay.
Then, one morning, as the mists rolled in and most of the men were out harvesting rice because the military was in such a state that men on the border had to harvest their own food, the Jurchen attacked, pouring out of the mist on horseback. Yi Sun-shin only had a dozen men to defend with. He and his handful of soldiers fought desperately, cutting their way to one group of captives and escaping with 50 people the Jurchen would have taken prisoner. But by this time, you know the story. In order to avoid blame, Yi's superior, a man named Yi Il, blamed the entire defeat on Yi Sun-shin. He had him brought back to the capital, tortured, and...
Bro, he has so many ops. It's crazy. His whole life is like trying to do something good for Korea and getting fucked over.
put on trial in an attempt to have him condemned so that Yi Il could avoid any of the blame. But Yi Sun-shin did not crack under torture, and when it came time to take the stand, he said this to Yi Il. My lord, you are asking me to assume the whole responsibility for the misfortune, but you are wrong. May I remind you that you have always refused my frequent request for reinforcement. The defeat was not a result of my negligence of duty, but in large part, your fault. Therefore, it is not I, but you, who should be held responsible for the defeat.
Based.
The court was stunned. Many of them knew of Yi's record and were inclined to believe him, so in the end, he was allowed to live, but he was stripped of his rank again and returned to the army as a common enlisted man, starting over at the very bottom, as if he'd never taken the military examinations.
Bro, he's had to reset like
He was once again placed on the northern border and asked to fight the invading tribes, and once again...
You know what, though? It's almost like he's getting to do Edge of Tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? He gets to restart from the beginning of the military every time and do it right. He's like getting practice in, dude. He's getting, he's getting live, die, repeat. That's why he's going to be the GOAT.
Again, he did so with distinction, until finally, in 1588, he asked that he be allowed to retire. But storm clouds were gathering over Korea, and some, especially his longtime friend, a man named Ryu Sung-young, recognized that soon the country would have need of good military men. While Yi had struggled through his career in the military, Ryu, his childhood compatriot, who had been his...
I'll pause for a second to check the thing, because there's ads. I will pause. This is... long time friend does not mean... Ads over? Okay, good. All right, good.
companion in games of war, had risen to be Prime Minister of Korea. It was actually through Ryu's influence, and because of his subtle aid, that Yi had time and again survived the machinations held against him. Now, Ryu planned to see that Yi would take his rightful place for the war he feared was coming.
Good friend!
On the next episode of Extra History, remember how in the Sengoku Jidai episodes we talked about that messy Japanese invasion
Wait, I'll just go right to part 2.
Jidai feared was coming? Now, on the next episode of Extra History, remember how in the Sengoku Jidai episodes we talked about that messy Japanese invasion of Korea? Well, that's about to happen.
Part 2, be like a mountain. Admiral Yi, be like a mountain.
At last, we've passed the phase of Yi's life where his every effort is thwarted by the machinations of corrupt officials and jealous superiors. Finally, we can begin the story that sees Yi rise to be the national hero of Korea. But first, we have to talk about the two contrasting states that are about to meet.
Wait, I want to know this. How old is Admiral Yi at this point? Admiral Yi Sun-shin. Wikipedia. So he is born the year 1545. And he wants to retire in 1588, they said. So he's like 43. 43, okay. He's about 43.
Bloody battle. If you watched the Sengoku Jidai episodes, you'll remember that Japan had just come out of 100 years of ceaseless war. Their entire society was built off of a martial hierarchy, where the most glorious thing a man could do was fight. Japan had fielded giant armies and had an economy devoted to war. They had hundreds of thousands of veteran soldiers, and they had seasoned generals, battle-hardened from years of campaigning. And
Scary.
now, for the first time ever, all those forces were unified under one man, Toyotomi Hideyoshi. The Korean state had, by contrast, been mostly at peace for 200 years. The state itself was a Confucian bureaucracy, which should have meant that it was an enlightened meritocracy, but in truth, the Korean government was rotten to its core, full
Right.
of factional
Corruption.
infighting and led by a king who perhaps might have been a great leader in times of peace, but was utterly unsuited for a state of war. In terms of military thinking, the Japanese had spent years perfecting the art of war. The daimyos had become early adopters of the arquebus and had rapidly innovated on firearm
Guns,
manufacturing
baby.
and tactics. They had created movable field works to protect their gunners, coordinated the use of spears and arquebusiers, drilled the men to release large, simultaneous volleys to break up a charge, and trained them to wait to fire until they were within an effective range.
Smart.
They were such enthusiastic adopters of the arquebus that when the Japanese eventually arrived on Korean shores, about a quarter of their total force would be armed with this fearsome weapon. The Japanese
And yet today, the Japanese have like no guns in their society. Well, we have plenty. Curious. Perhaps they didn't love them as much as they claim. Okay? They're not true fans of the gun.
had also become masters of the siege after so many decades of having to topple the highly
so
wrought,
fake.
master-crafted Japanese castles of the Sengoku age. The Koreans, on the other hand, had largely ignored the introduction of personal firearms and still relied mainly on the bow.
Sheesh.
But because the bow is a weapon that requires a great deal of training, and the Korean military was in a dissipated state, the actual number of effective troops they could field with this weapon was now very limited. The lists of who they could call to military service were all out of date, and so the initial mustering of forces would lag behind, and Korean defensive works were mostly just simple stone walls atop hills or mountains. But the Koreans did have two advantages.
What do they got?
Since the war that had been burning through Japan for the last 100 years was a civil war, and thus mostly land-based, Japan hadn't built up its navy nearly as much as their other armed forces. Additionally, while Japan produced vastly superior handguns, the Koreans had developed better naval cannon. And this all makes sense when you think about what both of these forces were used to
Right.
facing. Japanese forces were used to fighting large, organized land armies, and so they'd focused on developing the weapons and techniques required to counter them. Whereas Korea had mostly dealt with pirates and raiders, so they'd built cannon to help defend their coast, and they'd built simple hill forts so that when raiders showed up, the people could hide in the forts and simply wait for the raiders to go away. They didn't need complex structures, because the enemy Korea usually faced wasn't an enemy bent on conquest. But that was about to change.
I see.
Between 1587 and 1592, emissaries raced back and forth between Japan and Korea. Hideyoshi wanted the Koreans to just let him march his armies through their lands in order to attack his intended target, China. But besides the fact that letting giant foreign armies march across your country is generally a bad idea, the Koreans
People used to do this in free-for-all Age of Empires games, where it's like, hey, can you ally me real quick? Because like if you'd have a big border of cannons or like towers or some shit, they'd be like, can you ally me real quick so I can just walk through? I'm gonna kill the other guy, and then you go through their gate, and then get inside, and then you'd unally them, and then all your soldiers would kill all their fucking farms and shit and blow. That was classic. We used to do that shit all the time. Just straight lie.
also happened to be tributary allies of the Chinese with strong cultural and economic ties, so letting this army march through uncontested was out of the question. This whole thing seemed like madness to them. The idea that the Japanese would even ask for such a thing was unfathomable to many in court. At first, they assumed the request must be a bluff, maybe a negotiating tactic that would eventually end in the Japanese asking for trade concessions or tribute or something. But Ryu Song-yong saw further, to what was really about to go down. And so he got Yi a naval appointment in the southwestern part of Korea
Smart.
and helped to make sure that he rose rapidly through the ranks, becoming the naval commander for the province by 1591. This is where Yi's story really begins. Upon taking command, Yi saw the dire straits the Navy was in and knew he had little time. He began drilling his men and instilling in them the spirit they needed for the war to come. He commissioned a new type of ship, the famous turtle ship, which he helped design.
This is really the story of how Admiral Yi drilled all of the men in Korea. All the way across Korea.
It was a remarkable piece of naval technology, with a spiked roof to keep enemy boarding parties out, and a dragon...
This is the GOAT. This is, I mean, I learned about this again from Age of Empires, but like, if you play as Korea, you got to get turtle ships, and they were so fucking goated. They were so sick and powerful and cool, and so I learned about it because of that. He made Bowser. This is where the Japanese got the idea from Bowser, dude. They got cooked by these and thought, well, that's the perfect villain.
Head prow that could serve as a cannon or billow out noxious smoke. But even before the first of these ships could see active service, it happened. Sentries all across the southeast coast began to spot ships coming over the horizon. Then tens of ships. Then hundreds. This massive fleet flew no sails known to Korean arms. Fires were lit and word was spread. The Japanese were coming. But the local commanders refused to believe what they were seeing. They suggested that maybe it was a trade fleet, or maybe even a large tribute mission from the Japanese to apologize for how rude their ambassadors had been.
Holy copium! There's a huge fleet now. They're probably just bringing us gold to apologize for the rudeness of their ambassadors. That's cosmic cope.
And so, the local commanders did nothing. The approaching ships began to dock at Busan. Soldiers, fully armored and prepared for war, began to disembark from the ships, and still the local commanders did nothing. By nightfall, 300 ships full of warriors had landed. A Japanese army was now in Korea. Finally, the commanders realized what had just happened, but by now it was far too late. With well over 100 heavy Korean ships of war at the ready, they had just sat and watched this happen without even moving a single one of those ships out to scout the fleet. If they had, they would have found out that this was a Japanese commander acting against orders. Eager to be the first to Korea, he had sailed his fleet before their warship arrived. Turns out nearly all of those hundreds of ships were unarmed transports. No match for the Korean Navy, which still sat anchored at port doing nothing. The Japanese force moved like lightning, smashing army after army, crushing all in their way. Within the month, the Japanese were already in Seoul, 200 miles inland. Korean resistance had collapsed. And as the Japanese had pushed inland and moved out of Busan, the local commanders had scuttled their fleets. 100 Korean warships lost without a fight. But Busan's local commanders had sent word to Yi, asking for his help. So Yi set out with all 24 ships under his command, writing to other local commanders and telling them to rendezvous with him at sea. He left under cover of darkness and sailed through the night so his movements wouldn't be observed. By the time the various fleets met, they'd scraped together 45 warships and a handful of commandeered fishing ships. But Yi, despite never having commanded a battle at sea before, had a plan. He would fall on the Japanese while they were in harbor during the chaos of a sack. He found 50 of their vessels tied up at Okpo and descended upon them. The Japanese were mostly away from their ships at the time, looting and slaughtering the population. The roar of cannon alerted them to their mistake. Yi and his fleet tore through the enemy ships, salvo after salvo ripping into the light wood of the Japanese vessels. The Japanese tried to mount a defense, but to no avail. Soon, their men were throwing their weapons and armor overboard and trying to swim for the shore. By nightfall, 26 Japanese ships rested at the bottom of the harbor. Only one Korean sailor was injured. Yi decided to disappear back into open water before his forces fell into the same trap he'd just sprung on his enemy. But as they sailed, one of his outlying ships spotted 5 more Japanese warships. Yi fell upon them with a vengeance. Only one managed to escape. Then new reports came in of 13 more ships near Chinhae. When the sailors on those ships saw Yi, they abandoned their vessels entirely and fled on foot into the mountains. 43 Japanese ships sunk, and Yi had not lost a single vessel.
Giga Chad!
He was promoted to General Command of the Southern Navy for his actions, but the sight of Japanese slaughtering civilians would stick with him forever, and harden his resolve to defend the people of Korea. Join us next time as everyone else in Korea keeps losing, and Admiral Yi keeps winning.
All right, I gotta learn about this. Part 3, The Bright Moonlight of Hansanado. The dude who couldn't take an L.
The king had fled from Seoul. The court was making the arduous trek to Pyongyang. Half of Korea was already in Japanese hands. Yi Il, the very same man who had once tried to pass his negligence off to Yi Sun-shin, was the commander of the Korean army. His forces were routed in battle.
Dude completely threw Yi under the bus and is now the fucking commander. Wow. Failing upwards, bro. That guy's...
After battle. Essential fortifications and choke points were abandoned, surrendered with barely a fight. Then, in the Battle of Cheongju, the regular Korean forces, under the command of a man named Shin-rip, were annihilated. This is the moment that forces the king to abandon his capital. This is the moment that leads many to fear that Korea as a nation may not survive.
Oh, shit.
But on the very same day that the king fled from his seat, Admiral Yi was destroying the Japanese fleet in Okpo Harbor. Hope for the nation lived in a handful of ships plying the coast. For 3 weeks after Okpo, Yi gathered charts, scouted out...
This kind of explains to me why he's such a big deal in Korea. I remember learning about him there. I mean, this guy's like the ultimate. He's the ultimate him, dude.
The enemy fleet and waited for his secret weapon, the turtle ship, to arrive.
You know what the opposite of this is? When I went to New Zealand and saw their war museum, which is all about a battle they lost horrendously. What was the name of the battle? What was the name of the battle? Gallipoli? Yeah, it was Gallipoli. Yes, it was all about a battle where they sent all of their troops to, I think, help Britain in a terrible, tragic loss of a battle that was a disaster and poorly planned from minute one. It was just funny because, you know, I just grew up on American military bases, and so I've been to a lot of like military museums and shit. But almost always they're like, they celebrate the good parts and downplay the bad parts. And New Zealand didn't have. Yeah, New Zealand had this just one big L wrapped up with Britain.
Then his spies reported to him that the Japanese were anchored at Sachun. This was too near.
Gallipoli is a formative event in Australia and New Zealand history because it inspired more independence. Australia lost so hard at Gallipoli that we decided to stop being cucks to Britain. I guess it's an eternal reminder of British military command and and how poorly planned it was. That's funny. All right, I get it.
His personal headquarters for comfort. So it was time he tested out the turtle ship. It was time he drove them off.
Turtle ship.
But when his tiny fleet of 26 ships arrived outside Sachin, he saw that the Japanese arquebusiers had taken up positions along the cliffs above the harbor. If he were to attack, they could pour down fire on his ships. He pondered this for a moment. Then he sent a small detachment to sail within sight of the Japanese fleet. Once they were sure the Japanese had spotted them, they turned and fled, and the Japanese gave chase. But the retreat was feigned. As soon as the Japanese fleet entered open water, Yi fell upon them with his entire force. His turtle ship plowed into the middle of the Japanese armada. Cannon fire rang out from all sides. Ships splintered and burned in the setting sun. The Japanese tried to close in, but they couldn't manage to board the covered turtle ship. With the Korean warships surrounding them and the turtle ship in their midst, the Japanese fought a hopeless battle until all 13 of the ships that had pursued the Koreans to open water were at the bottom of the sea. Not a single Korean vessel was lost. After the battle, as his commanders gathered for a debriefing, Yi loosed his coat, pulled out a sword, and dug out a bullet that had lodged in his shoulder. His sub-commanders were amazed. To maintain morale, Yi had let no one know that he'd been injured in the fight. But as they all sat dumbfounded, Yi simply began to brief them on what to do in case of a counterattack. The next day, local fishermen reported to Yi that the Japanese were anchored at Dangpo, and that their men were sacking the city. Yi ordered his fleet to move with all haste. He would not let another Japanese slaughter go unanswered. When they reached the harbor city of Dangpo, he once again smashed through the enemy line with his turtle ship, positioned it right next to the enemy flagship, and buried shot after shot in its side. With his turtle ship in their midst, the enemy couldn't maneuver, and because the turtle ship had heavy guns on all sides, it couldn't be flanked. It simply loosed salvo after salvo at everything around it. And while the turtle ship caused chaos, the rest of the Korean ships surrounded the Japanese and trapped them in the harbor.
Encircled.
At the height of the battle, one of Yi Sun-shin's sub-commanders, Kwon-jun, stood upon the deck of his vessel, drew his bow, and loosed an arrow at the enemy admiral. The shot found its mark. Two of his men then leapt upon the enemy flagship and cut off the Japanese admiral's head. Seeing their commander's head held aloft, the Japanese were thrown into a panic. Command broke down, and in the chaos, Yi's ships sank the Japanese vessels one by one. As night fell and the Koreans withdrew, not a single Japanese ship remained. 2 days later, another Korean fleet, a fleet that was supposed to have joined them before any of this began but ran behind, finally rendezvoused with Yi, bringing his squadron up to 51 ships in total. With this larger force, he began to chase...
Dude, this kind of reminds me of, there was this game called Empire Earth. You know how Age of Empires is like all set in the past? Empire Earth was a game where you start out in caveman times and you can tech up all the way to the future. Space vehicles or whatever. It's a good game. But if you played online multiplayer, like for single player, that makes sense and it's fun. But I play a lot of multiplayer in that game. And it's actually pretty roughly balanced because, you know, all you do is spend some resources and then you tech up. And then all of a sudden you're 150 years in the future. And so occasionally someone would have like swordsmen and you would press a button and then your horsemen would just upgrade into tanks. And then you just, but it's a real-time game. It's not like Civ. Civ is much more slower paced. Empire Earth is RTS. Like it's a game where you have troops that are walking down the field and just turn into tanks instantly. And then, so like you would time your attacks around upgrades. And if you had a better upgrade, it would just like you could have tanks that just instantly kill everything around them. It's 100-0. So, you know, the game would often revolve around these timing attacks where you would instantly upgrade and then just blow the shit out of people.
Down rumors of another anchored Japanese fleet sacking a Korean town. The rumor turned out to be true, and again, Yi pounced upon the Japanese while they were disorganized, plundering a town. Again, Yi sent his turtle ship into their midst, and again, he used a feigned retreat to lure them out into open water, although this time he did it to keep the Japanese from fleeing to shore if they were defeated. Again, they followed, and again, upon his signal, his fleet turned upon their pursuers. Again, the Japanese admiral fell in the battle, and the Japanese morale broke. Again, the Koreans trapped the fleeing vessels, and again, the Japanese fleet, 26 ships in all, was destroyed without a single loss for these forces. Turtle ship was OP.
Wear a helmet.
Upon hearing of all this, Hideyoshi was furious. He was so close to conquering Korea. His men had taken Pyongyang. The Korean court had been driven all the way to a tiny border village. Any further and the King of Korea wouldn't even be on Korean soil anymore. There was only one province he had not yet been able to overrun, Chola, where Yi was based. And without control of the sea, he couldn't resupply his massive...
And Yi was based.
...army in the field. Yi must be destroyed. The order was given. There would be no more land raids from his navy until Yi's fleet was at the bottom of the Tsushima Strait. He ordered his admirals to pool their forces and to form a massive fleet to sweep aside this admiral that was causing him so much pain.
Sounds like
the three main Japanese admirals were to gather their fleets in Busan, but the admiral with the largest fleet, Wakisaka Yasuharu, decided that bringing the fleets together was taking too long. Side note, if you watched our Sengoku Jidai series, this is one of the men who would eventually betray Ishida at the Battle of Sekigahara. Anyway, eager for glory and unwilling to wait for the rest of the Japanese forces, he set out with his 73 ships. I mean, why wait? He had 73 of the best ships in the Japanese fleet, and he knew Yi's armada, however devastating they might have been so far, was a small force. But Yi hadn't been idle after his last battle. He'd been drilling his men in new tactics and constructing additional ships. With these new additions, his fleet now numbered 56, and most importantly, with 2 new turtle ships he could bring to bear. On July 7th, 1592, a local farmer came to tell Yi that he had seen a huge Japanese armada, at least 70 ships strong, in the Kyonerang Strait. Yi had his fleet there by the next day. Knowing that he couldn't maneuver in the strait, Yi sent out 6 of his ships to lure the Japanese. And sure enough, the entire Japanese force followed at all haste. But this time, the Japanese faced yet another surprise. This technique of luring out the Japanese had been working so well that Yi had trained his men in a special formation called the Crane's Wing, where they would form a U around the enemy vessels that chased his ships, compressing them from all sides, making them easy targets, and leaving them no room to maneuver.
Bro, the ocean is flat. You can see a long distance. These guys are literally pre-encircling you and luring you in. That's crazy. They're pre-encircling. You're literally walking into an open circle. That's crazy. They do it behind the horizon. Listen, I'm sure there's more to it IRL. But to fall for this lure strategy 3 times is a lack of communication at the very least.
The sound of cannon fire ripped the air. One of the largest naval battles in world history raged for hours. But when the smoke cleared, 47 of the Japanese ships were sunk and 12 were captured. Only 14 of them escaped to the harbor at Busan, and still, not a single Korean ship was lost.
Fucking
the next
insane.
Day, Yi was informed of the location of the other 2 admirals' fleets.
That's
they were
fucking
anchored
insane.
together at Angulpo. Yi saw the opportunity for a decisive blow, and so he
Still
set his
no
vessels fresh off
ships?
the last battle towards another attack. This time, though, no matter what he tried, the Japanese refused to be lured out of their position. So Yi sent his ships in small assault squads, using their superior range to hammer the largest
now
of the
you get
Japanese
it.
ships, then moving clear so another squad could circle in and fire. The battle was long and bloody. Though still none of Yi's ships were sunk, between the action outside of Gyeonerang and the Battle of Angulpo,
I'm sorry, the battle was long and bloody. They didn't fall for your trap, and you still didn't lose a single ship? What the fuck?
hundreds of his sailors were wounded. It was the most damage the Japanese had done to Yi's fleet to date. But the majority of the Japanese fleet in the harbor was destroyed. Only a few ships remained, and these Yi ordered not to be touched, because many of the Japanese soldiers had fled to the nearby shore, and, as he said, many brigands escaped into the mountains where local inhabitants have taken refuge. If all the Japanese ships were to be burned, the brigands would massacre Korean citizens in revenge. As he expected, instead of slaughtering the peasants in the hills, the Japanese boarded their remaining boats and slipped away in the night. 6 days later, upon hearing the news of these calamitous defeats, Hideyoshi ordered all offensive naval operations to cease. From now on, the Japanese Navy would only guard the passage to Busan. And so, with one stroke, Yi destroyed all of Hideyoshi's hopes for invading China. And without being able to resupply from the sea, even the Japanese efforts on the Korean peninsula were in jeopardy. The supply lines to the forces occupying Pyongyang were sorely stretched, and pursuing the Korean court any further became effectively impossible. Though the Korean army had been beaten on land time and time again, Yi had saved Korea.
That's
but the
crazy.
war wasn't over. Join us next time for Yi's attempt to land a finishing blow, treachery, and perhaps the greatest last stand in naval history.
Oh, we gotta see that. We gotta see that. Where's the fucking link? So far, even more impressive than I thought. I knew he was a good admiral. I did not know that he essentially single-handedly saved Korea. Like, almost certainly is a man that, had he not existed or had died in that raid, would have altered the course of that country's history. That's fucking sick. That's really insane.
Last time, we left Yi storming through the waters south of Korea, savaging the Japanese fleet wherever he went. He had driven them first to consolidate their forces to try to thwart him, and then, finally, to give up on offensive naval operations entirely, restricting their fleets to just defending the vital supplies coming in at Busan. Now it was in this last harbor that Yi would attack them. In the 2 months since the Battle of Angulpo, Yi had trained his men, reinforced his fleet, and tried to rationalize the structure of Korean naval command.
Now you say trained.
Now, on September 1st, 1592, he was ready to take on the combined Japanese armada at Busan. His fleet of 166 ships set out to destroy the nearly 500 Japanese ships awaiting them in Busan Bay.
500?
He caught a few stragglers along the way, but the Japanese had finally learned from their past encounters with him. They were holed up in the harbor now, and while Yi's ships were able to fire into the harbor from outside Japanese cannon range, he couldn't find an opening to get close enough to achieve the type of complete victory he craved.
Right.
As long as the Japanese were in that harbor, they were protected by the surrounding troops and cannon on the shore.
Right.
By the end of the day, Yi's fleet had destroyed 130 ships, and the Japanese hadn't sunk a single vessel, but the Japanese forces still held the all-important harbor of Busan. Yi had not been able to break their last line of supply. Now they'd be able to re-entrench and reinforce the harbor. As winter set in and the campaign season slowed down, the situation on the ground changed as well. An army from China had finally arrived in the north, and by January they had driven the Japanese out of Pyongyang. All over the country, the Japanese started to fall back, unable to sustain their lengthy lines of supply due to Yi.
I'm surprised China didn't keep up their own push, though, and take advantage of Korea's relative weakness. They just helped.
Bottling up of their navy. By April, Seoul was retaken as well, and Busan served as the last great Japanese stronghold, anchoring their control on southern Korea. By August, Yi was promoted to Supreme Commander of the Korean Army and moved his base to the island of Hansando, where he had previously used his crane wing formation to crush the Japanese offensive fleet. Again and again, Yi petitioned the court for Marines so that he could resume naval operations, because his fleet couldn't attack the Japanese so long as they stayed defended under their shore guns, and without Marines, he couldn't dislodge the shore batteries in order to follow up with the naval attack. But the Korean army was still in disarray.
I think the problem is, this is what the problem the Marines always have, is they try to get the bravest people to join, but they all instead become streamers. So like the Marines have a really hard time recruiting because they can only get the cowards. Do you know what I'm saying? But all the really brave people go into a different profession. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge for sure. Can you run it back from part 1? That's why they
at this point. Some of the most significant military gains on land were actually being
Marine
made by
ads
guerrilla
on this
forces,
site.
and the righteous army.
Wait, do you get Marine ads on Twitch? Why do they want my lazy ass? Do you really? That's funny. They'll regret it, bro. They'll regret who comes in. They compare it to gaming. I do know the military's recruiting on Twitch. I know that, but it's just funny. I feel like unless you're doing drone controls, I don't know who you're recruiting here. Yeah, drones use Xbox controllers. I got a Navy ad with the tagline, "We don't like campers either." What, are you serious? Can I see this? Wait, Navy ad, "We don't like campers either." Is that real? Oh, it apparently is real, but I can't find it. Maybe it's on TikTok? Let's see. We don't like campers either.
Name a better commercial.
Sorry. I don't get it.
Name a better
Wait,
commercial.
what? That's not it. That's just ocean sounds. That was the first result. Footprints? I see. I didn't see it. It was kind of dark.
This is what it's like to be known as.
Oh, maybe this is it? OG vid from the Navy?
I said I'd never join.
Thought living on sub would be too hard.
I figured only the weatherman tracks storms.
I said my job wouldn't matter.
Never knew how strong I was. I never thought this would be my commute.
We should make one of these for the ACLU, and it's like people recording glizzy songs and shit. Do they say it or no?
I'd never get out of my hometown.
Or be the one who stops an attack.
Joining the Navy sounds crazy. Saying never actually is.
Navy, forged by the sea. I believe you that you saw it, but I can't find it, bro. I can't. You got an Air Force ad? That's funny. All right, who here is enlisting now? Now that you've seen that sick ad. Damn, I wish I could find this fucking campers. That sounds really funny, and it sounds like it's real because I see people talking about it. But, all right, whatever. Back to the Yi Sun Shin. Admiral Yi, Admiral Yi.
Armies of Buddhist monks, and what little of the regular army there was not already deployed on the main offensive with the Chinese was simply not up to the task Yi needed. And so his fleet sat, patrolled the waters, and kept the Japanese from breaking out of Busan. they would not get to engage in another major battle for some time. So instead, Yi focused on turning his island base into a production center. With the country ravaged by war and most of the working-age men conscripted into the army or the navy, the central government couldn't provide Yi's forces with the food, lumber, or weapons he needed
He's
to
got to
keep
do
his men
everything,
fed
bro.
and his fleet in top shape.
He's got
So
to
he
win the
invited
battles
refugees
and
to
make the
come to his
economy.
island. He would protect them if they would work the land. At first, they were just producing grain, but soon they were harvesting salt and timber. Then the production facilities grew to...
Someone said man is playing Civ. He literally is. He's getting all the natural... He's building the entire supply chain from first principles, and he has to drill every man.
handle boat building and uniform manufacturing. Soon there was a full-fledged R&D wing on the island, and great forges to produce goods of iron. The first truly successful Korean muskets were forged here by Yi's research team. But as Yi was making his navy self-sufficient, the land war in Korea slowly ground to a stalemate, and peace talks began. The talks wore on for 3.5 years, until in September 1596,
Japanese.
negotiations broke down, and Hideyoshi prepared a second invading force of 141,500 men to head to the shores of Korea. As this new invasion force was setting sail, the Korean court received a letter from one of the Japanese commanders, in which he appeared to be selling out one of his counterparts, telling the Koreans exactly where his hated rival's fleet would be sailing, and suggesting that if only Admiral Yi Sun-shin would sail there, he could wipe them out and do everybody a favor.
They really thought they ate with that one. We'll get them on this one. See if you lure us, we're going to lure you. I wonder if it works.
Now, Admiral Yi heard this and laughed. Yeah, nice try. He refused the order to sail his fleet into an obvious Japanese trap.
That's so funny.
But Yi's childhood friend, Ryu Sung-young, had enemies in court, and when they heard of Yi's refusal to follow orders, they seized on this opportunity and had Yi tried for treason. Ryu could do nothing to save him.
Bro!
Yi was ordered to return to Seoul for
He
his
saved the
punishment.
fucking
His replacement
country!
as head of the Navy would be Won Kyun. This was the guy who'd sat and done nothing when the Japanese ships first invaded, and then promptly scuttled his own fleet. A fleet 4 times as large as the one Yi had been using to inflict such heavy losses on their enemies. He was nearly sentenced to death for his insubordination, but there were still those in court who saw his value, and though they couldn't save him entirely, they did save his life. He was once more reduced to the rank of a common soldier and sent off to fight with one of the armies. But not long after he arrived at the army, the Japanese tried the same trick again. They sent the court a letter, this time informing them of a large transport fleet that was on its way, and saying how easy it would be to pick off these transports if they hurried. Won Kyun was ordered to intercept this juicy target, and he immediately set sail with every ship Yi had built. But when saying how easy it would be to pick off these transports if they hurried. Won Kyun was ordered to intercept this juicy target, and he immediately set sail with every ship Yi had built.
Are you guys hearing him or am I crazy? You can hear this? Right here.
Won Kyun was ordered to intercept this juicy target, and he immediately set sail with every ship Yi had built. But when he reached the waters near Busan, he was shocked to find not an unarmed transport convoy, but a massive war fleet of 500 ships. Despite this...
I'm now realizing, dude, I've been in these Discord calls where I keep telling people, like, hey, your audio cut out. I'm now realizing 100% it is my headphones every time. They're clearly not working. They are clearly cutting out. That is a factoroonie. All right, facts.
And the exhaustion his men faced from traveling so quickly, Won Kyun ordered a head-on assault. The winds picked up, and a gale began to form. Won Kyun couldn't keep his fleet together. Soon, some 30 Korean ships were burning, having drifted close enough to the enemy that, for the first time in the war, the Japanese could deploy their preferred form of naval warfare.
Obviously, this is bad for Korea, but it's kind of like for Yi's overall legacy, this is the GOAT situation because, you know, people could have given all the credit to the turtle ships. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like when LeBron leaves the Cavs and they suck ass. It just shows that, like, you were the man. It's legacy points for sure. It shows that they put it in someone else's hands. Korea's fucked.
Warfare. Boarding parties. In a panic, Won Kyun ordered a retreat and fled to the
Oh, it's
island
like
of
Faker.
Kadokdo,
Yeah, it's
where
like
he
when
ordered
Faker
his
was
men
off
off the
T1 and
ships
they
to
sucked.
resupply. What he hadn't realized was that this island was under Japanese control. As his men searched for fresh water, they were set upon by the Japanese island garrison and slaughtered. Those who escaped fled back to the ships without any...
Oh, yeah. It's burger time.
It's the 5 gals. Why are you laughing?
Guess why?
Burger. Wait, I want a bite of the burger.
Man, you don't ever get a lettuce bun like me.
I don't care. I like all boyga.
You want a bite of the burger, huh?
Get the boyga.
All right.
A lettuce Larry is this dog.
I don't even want to show it on camera. They just make fun of my lettuce bun.
It's very beautiful.
They call me a West Coast California liberal. They say I want to dye my hair pink and
You're the
vote for-
liberal elite. Look at this fry. Where's the camera so I can zoom in? Here we go. Look at this smooth fry. I like soft fries. I don't like crunchy fries. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's tasty.
Yeah. All right.
I noticed that I ordered 2 fries, and yet I only have 1 small cup of fries. So I assume there's a lot of fries out there.
I took the other cup for us because that's what you ordered for us.
Yeah, but there should be like a big bag of fries. I assume like 100 fries.
Are you telling me you're gonna eat more fries than that?
Yeah, this one tiny little cup.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I'm so hungry. I'm like starving.
Guys, he's crazy. Well, if you want more, just come get them. Go being a lazy
Man.
ass.
I was looking forward to a heaping helping of fries, so I ordered a second one, and yet I only have this tiny little
I
cup.
thought you ordered the second one for us because you asked us.
I did order a second for you, but there should be a lot still.
Well, they're in the bag.
All right.
If you're looking for a video rec, I have one.
You have a video rec?
Uh,
What is it? She's grinning like the
I have
Grinch.
to type it in because I don't really know.
What is it?
We have to finish this, right?
Yeah, but
Could you pull it up? Is it private over
yeah,
there?
over there. What is it?
Okay, go to YouTube.
YouTube.com.
Yeah. And then type in this so I can get to the channel.
Okay.
I don't like your keyboard.
Yeah, you spelled every word wrong.
Wait, where's the video?
This is just Banjo Kazooie.
No. Wait, I'm trying to get to the channel. Wait, I think I remember his name.
She just looked up the soundtrack to Banjo Kazooie. I'm not kidding.
I think it's this guy.
Are you trying to figure out how to generate more?
But I can't remember the channel. Why
This
is
is some
your...
guy who teaches you how to get sales leads.
No,
Has 8K views.
why is your algo so stupid that you can't get good results? Well, maybe if I typed it correctly, right? Wait, what?
Play the
Man,
song. Play the song.
I'm
play
like
the song.
losing it right now.
Babe, play the song.
No, because you're watching another video.
I just want to hear the song while I eat.
Wait, what's wrong with your algorithm?
Babe. This
Babe.
is not the algorithm.
Okay, okay, there's a song where I look for it.
I didn't even click it.
Oh, I did click it. What is happening? Babe, where's the song? I mean, the video. What? Oh, it's a good video, though. What? Babe, I'm like losing it right now. I am so... Oh, there, okay. Hey, Alex Yard, not Alex Ford. Okay, that was pretty close. Okay, and then you have this phone song. The video. It's like so on this one. If you need to kill time. Okay? Like that one. It's like super interesting, but I don't know if it's because I don't know anything about music that it's interesting to me.
Thanks, babe. Yeah, I'll check it out.
Yeah. Alright. Thanks for the fries.
I definitely need some more. I'm already going. I already need them all. I need more fries. I'm not watching that fucking video for the life of me. What this video has 30,000 views. It's about Donkey Kong Country 2 music. What the hell, bro? That wasn't part of my vows. I'm not gonna watch fucking 14-minute video on Donkey Kong Country 2 music. Watch it. Sounds lit. Maybe if I had fries. If I was full on fries, I could probably watch it. Fries, perhaps?
Okay.
We're just about to watch the video that you linked.
Truly think you got scammed.
No, really?
Yeah, because you ordered 2 cups, but I honestly think it's fewer than what you normally get with 1 cup.
Oh, Chad, this is the worst outcome.
Maybe you should have gotten a bread instead of fucking lettuce.
She's pandering. She's actually pandering.
No, I agree.
She's pandering. I swear to God, she's pandering. That she has never once, not once, ever mentioned a lettuce bun. And now I told her that the chat likes it. She's pandering so hard. Holy shit, she's pandering, dude. Oh my God, she's fucking Rudy Giuliani talking about 9/11. Holy shit, I just got fucking pandered. I got debate lorded. Man, I'm so hungry. Unless she scamas me. Unless they scraped all the fries out and this is a prank. Because there's no fucking fries in this bag. This Five Guys has never done this to me. I gotta check right now. I'm sorry. I have to check. I have to know. 1 second. Wow, unironically, that is the least amount of fries Five Guys has ever put in a bag that I've ever purchased, and I bought 2 fries. That's fucked up. I actually feel cheated. I'm so hungry. Shrinkflation, bro. Shrinkflation. Maybe the driver ate them? I mean, it has the seal on it. I doubt it. Damn, that sucks. I'm so hungry. I'm like starving hungry. All right, let's watch the rest.
Any of the supplies they desperately needed. Then the fleet just sat there, deflated and listless. Commanders asked for orders, but Won Kyun had none. Though Busan itself was not far away, he didn't even send out scouts or reposition his fleet. Then, on the night of July 15th, guided by a full moon, the Japanese struck. Won Kyun's forces were in a disadvantageous position. His men were fatigued from lack of supply and
It is funny. I'm sorry. I do get it. I'm thinking about it now. It is funny to order a lettuce bun for ostensibly health reasons and then wolf down as many fucking fries as you possibly can handle. It's like... That is funny, but... End of the day, I like the lettuce bun. I think it's tasty is a thing. I like it. It's got that crisp texture. Like for me, it's such a habit that I just like it. It's not like
demoralized by their loss and the days of waiting. Caught off guard at night and without any sort of plan, they were no match for the organized and coordinated Japanese assault. Even abandoning ship couldn't save them, as those that made it to one of the nearby shores found themselves face to face with the Japanese army, who were silently waiting there for any stragglers who might try to escape, and were quickly cut down. Of the fleet Yi had so carefully built, only 12 ships escaped, saved by one of the sub-commanders who had tried to warn Won Kyun of the danger they faced. 157 Korean ships were lost that day, including every turtle ship ever built. So with only 12 ships left in the entire Navy, who did Korea call?
Bro! What a fucking colossal throw! What a shitheel! He has like 15 battles in a row, 0 losses. They get rid of him, they lose every turtle ship and 100 ships. That's such a massive, massive corruption bag fumble.
Call upon? Who else? But mere days after reinstating Yi as admiral, the court informed him that they were disbanding the Navy. Yi responded thusly. This humble subject still has 12 ships. However small the number may be, I solemnly swear I will be able to defend the sea if I prepare myself for death to resist the enemy. And so, they let him.
Okay, I'm sure
So Yi plotted.
that on some level, some of this is maybe, I don't know, played up for this video. But if this is even 70% true, actually, I'm sure it's all true, but you know, whatever, there's details all out. If this is even closer to true, this guy's one of the biggest Giga Chads in human history. That's crazy, dude. What a single-minded devotion to a country that has completely fucked you over so many times.
Pondered where he would make his.
Yeah, why has there not been a movie on this guy? Well, no, not about this guy. About the white guy who joins his ship and learns the power of friendship and teaches them the idea of turtle ships. Can I make a movie like that? Oh, that'd be sick as fuck, dude. Just like a white guy. Maybe we can get like, I don't know, Timothy Chalamet or something. And he like lands in Korea and he's like, what if you guys made a turtle type ship? Chris Pratt. Yeah, Chris Pratt. Yeah, and his pet turtle. Yeah, that would be a sick fucking movie, dude. That is what I would watch.
Last stand. This would be it. This one decision would seal the fate of Korea. He studied charts and tides, and finally came to decide on Myeongyang, the Roaring Strait. This particular strait had a strong current, but unknown to the Japanese, its current had a strange property. Every 3 hours, it changed direction. It was upon this unusual current that Yi would gamble everything. On September 16th, the Japanese fleet, looking to destroy the final remnant of the Korean Navy, found Yi's scouts at the mouth of the strait. They chased the scouts into the strait, and that's when Yi fell upon them. Yi's flagship dashed into their midst, roaring cannon and tearing through Japanese timber. But his ship fought alone. The rest of his navy, possessed by fear at facing such a large force, had lagged behind. Eventually, though, seeing the havoc Yi's ship was wreaking on the
They ran
enemy,
the same
they took
gambit
heart.
again.
Messengers were sent from boat to boat with a mix of inspirational words, threats, and the hope of victory. And soon, the rest of Yi's tiny armada dove into the fray. Then, a stroke of luck. The enemy flagship was blown apart by friendly fire, and the Japanese began to waver. Some of their ships began to turn about to fall back. And it was just at this moment that the water's current turned. The strait was too narrow for all the Japanese ships to maneuver around each other, and with the current roaring against them, ship slammed into ship. They tried in vain to retreat, tangled, ships smashing into one another, screams and chaos, and over it all, the roaring water. With the current now on their side, the Koreans gave chase, laying into enemy ships on either side. A hail of fire and arrows. The Japanese boats burnt and sank. 133 vessels had come to crush this tiny remnant of Korean Navy, and 31 of them wouldn't be returning. Yi, even when facing odds of 10 to 1, had once again not lost a single ship.
Jesus
Word of Yi's
Christ!
victory spread. As his tiny fleet sailed, one by one, other ships began to show up. Ships that had been thought lost. Ships that had been hiding after the previous disaster under Woncheon. These ships now came to join Yi's tiny armada. Refugees flocked to where Yi's ships were anchored, willingly giving him food, cloth, and iron. And perhaps most importantly, the Chinese, who had mostly limited their naval efforts to guarding ports until now, decided that they could work with the Korean Navy and take the offensive. And so we'll leave Yi rebuilding the Korean Navy until next week, when we see the Japanese invasion ended for good.
Bum, 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 bum. All right, one more. I assume this is the last one? What a goat. What an absolute goat. What an insane last stand. You'd think with boats, there's just not that much you can do to beat great numbers. In my mind, it's like, because you have such less flexibility, you'd think an admiral couldn't overcome those kind of odds. It's funny because Atrioc would never have watched this if it was one 45-minute video. That's absolutely so true. But because they broke into a bunch of 7-minute videos, I will keep clicking them in a row until the video is done.
When we left off, Yi had crushed the Japanese at the Battle of Myeongyang and was busy rebuilding the Korean Navy after their disastrous losses while he was being falsely accused. Now, just as he's beginning to coordinate with the Chinese Navy on how to prosecute the war, something major happens. Maybe the one event that can truly change the course of this war. Hideyoshi dies. 6 years and 4 months after the fateful Japanese landing on Korea, the man who started it all, the man who envisioned a vast Asian empire radiating out from Japan, died. This was a sea change. Hideyoshi had been holding the Japanese in Korea by sheer force of will. As soon as he died, the council of men who ran Japan in his stead all looked at one another and said, "Does anyone here actually want to keep fighting Korea? Okay, show of hands, who wants to stay in Korea?" Nobody? All right then. With that, they agreed to pull the Japanese forces out of there as soon as they could negotiate a deal which would let them withdraw their forces safely. But the Koreans were not so eager for peace after seeing hundreds of thousands of their countrymen slaughtered during Hideyoshi's invasion. So Admiral Yi continued to coordinate with the Chinese forces to bottle up the Japanese in one of their last strongholds, the port of Suncheon. The Chinese army closed around the city on land, and the Korean and Chinese navies blockaded the port. Seeing the situation as hopeless, the Japanese commander decided the best option he had left was to try to bribe everybody. But each time it seemed as though he was succeeding in bribing the Chinese contingents, Yi shamed them into falling back in line. Seeing no hope of peaceful retreat, the Japanese commander had one last plan. He dispatched a messenger boat to slip through the Chinese lines and tell the other major Japanese garrison to deploy all their ships and rendezvous with him as they tried to break their way through the Chinese and Korean blockade. But Yi got word of this plan and knew that he must prepare. The next night, November 15th, 1598, long after the sun had fallen below the horizon and the water had faded from blue to deep black, Yi told his forces to slip away from the blockade. They would try to intercept the reinforcing fleet in the fateful Noryang Strait. Near 2 a.m., the joint Korean and Chinese fleet fell upon the resting Japanese ships. At first it was chaos, cannon lighting up the water at night, but soon the Japanese tried to regroup. Despite being caught off guard, they still had 500 ships to the combined 150 of Yi and the Chinese. And moreover, they were fueled by desperation. If they lost here, who knows if they'd ever see Japan again.
Right.
But the Allied forces had two advantages going for them as well. For one, they had once again caught the Japanese in a strait where they could not easily maneuver their massive fleet. And two, even if they could maneuver, many of their ships were transports, which were only useful for boarding and arquebus fire in a fight. In desperation, the Japanese attacked, driving their ships through the withering hail of the enemy cannonade. Unfortunately for Yi, the Chinese commander, who wasn't used to fighting the Japanese and had no...
fucking audio cut out again. The fucking audio cut out.
...ships through the withering hail of the enemy cannonade. Unfortunately for Yi, the Chinese commander, who wasn't used to fighting the Japanese and had no experience with Yi's long-range form of naval warfare, charged forward to meet the Japanese fleet and prepared to engage them in hand-to-hand combat. The Chinese commander was surrounded. Dozens of Japanese ships descended on the Chinese flagship. Yi ordered his own ship to attempt a rescue. Yi's flagship plunged into the midst of the enemy. He was committed now. It would be fierce, close combat the rest of the way. Exactly the type of fight Yi had always tried to avoid. The vessels were so close that unarmed Korean sailors began throwing bundles of burning sticks down on the enemy decks. As Yi's ship broke through the waves, he spotted 3 of the enemy's admirals standing on the deck of one of the Japanese ships attacking his ally. And so, Yi drew his bow and loosed. One of the admirals fell. For a moment...
No way. No way is this true. I don't... That actually doesn't... That's crazy. Yi personally shot another admiral with an arrow while also fucking...
But there was almost a silence in the midst of the fighting, as everybody looked to see where that arrow had come from. Then one of the Japanese admirals roused himself from his shock and shouted that it was Yi. All the ships must attack Yi. All the Japanese vessels turned and began to give chase to Yi's flagship. But now it was the Chinese admiral's turn to take action, and his ships tore into the vessels pursuing Yi. Soon the fight was on the deck of the Chinese flagship, Chinese Dao sparking against Japanese katana. In the end, the Japanese boarding parties were repelled, but many from both sides lay dead on the deck. As dawn began to bring light back to the scene, everyone could see how badly the Japanese were faring. They attempted to flee, but Yi would have none of it. These people who had come to his land, who had despoiled his home, who had slaughtered his people and endangered his nation, no, he would not let them flee. He grabbed the mallet from the ship's drummer and began to beat the war drum himself, urging his ships to go ever faster. The haunting echo of the drum pushed the fleet on. Its beat hounded the Japanese, bit at their heels. His fleet moved like it never had before, the drums steadily beating like the call of the god of war. They were upon the Japanese. Cannons roared, arquebuses answered. Shouts and screams were heard as ship after ship was caught by the pursuing fleet, possessed by the beat of the drums of war. But then, just for an instant, the drums faltered. Seen by no one but his son, his nephew, and a loyal servant, Yi had been struck by a stray arquebus ball. They rushed to his side as he slumped against the drum, trying to aid him, asking if there was anything they could do. With his last breath, he said to them, "We are about to win this war. Keep beating the drum. Do not let anyone know of my death." His son picked up the mallet and continued the beat. Dressed in Yi's armor, his son and his nephew took up the command.
Oh,
For hours, they were Yi, commanding as he would, with all his ability and skill. None of Yi's officers ever realized he had fallen until, as the battle was closing, the Chinese flagship was once again surrounded. Yi's son ordered his ship into the thick. They darted forward, breaking the cordon around the Chinese flagship, helping the Chinese to escape. The fighting was fierce, but it was near the last of it. And as the day closed, the Chinese admiral sailed toward Yi's flagship and called out to thank Yi for saving him, to invite Yi to celebrate the glorious day together. But he was met by Yi's son.
Sad.
Instantly, he knew what had happened, and 3 times he threw himself to the deck, wailing and crying out, "Even after death, you saved my life." This was the last battle of the war. 300 Japanese ships were destroyed or captured. After this, the remaining Japanese garrisons would either be captured one by one by the Chinese and Korean forces, or slip back to Japan to fight one last struggle before Tokugawa's ascension as shogun. At last, the Imjin War was at an end. Hideyoshi's dream of a Japanese empire was broken. Korea was free. But Yi would never see it. Thousands turned out to see his body returned to his small home village. People lined the road and wailed at the passing of a man they may never have met. The Chinese admiral wrote for him a eulogy, and even the court and the king tried to make their recompense. And so passed the man so ill-treated in life, so often demoted and accused, the man who would forever be known as the martial lord of loyalty.
Great series. And a really cool story about Admiral Yi. I learned more about his incredible exploits. The comments are pretty funny. Daddy, are there any real life superheroes? Son, let me tell you the story of Admiral Yi. Who's your favorite Korean idol? Who do you idolize? Admiral Yi Sun Shin. Pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. That was extra history.